Well, with their thoughts on this new automotive strategy and other matters, we are now joined by our political strategist. Marci Surkes is the Chief Strategy Officer and Managing Director at Compass Rose Group. She's also a Liberal strategist. Cole Hogan is a Conservative strategist, and George Soule is an NDP strategist, founder and principal at On Step Strategies. Hello to all three of you.
Hello.
Hi, Michael.
So listen, I think it's fair to say that, in the summer when Mark Carney suspended the EV mandate, there were a lot of questions as to what he was going to do going forward. And now we have this new EV strategy wrapped into a greater plan, I guess, in terms of trying to encourage the automotive industry in this country. Will this be enough to silence critics who've criticized this Prime Minister for not being concerned enough with the environment, Marci?
Mr. Carney is taking a pragmatic approach across the board, and that's true today as well. This is almost emblematic of what we're seeing from Mr. Carney in terms of his own strategy. He's saying, you know what, we are going to be environmentally responsible. I recognize that perhaps this is a shift from what people came to expect from the previous Liberal government in terms of being leaders in, let's call it a more aggressive manner, almost more of an activist government, so to speak. And Mr. Carney is not saying that Canada will stop being a steward when it comes to climate change. He's saying quite the opposite, that he is a climate leader, that we are taking it seriously, but he is taking a step back and saying, what can we actually achieve? And let's not forget, I mean, all of this is happening against a very different backdrop from the previous government. And so these steps may feel like a ratcheting back to some, and I'm not going to argue that it is certainly a step in a different direction. But if it is one that can achieve results in a more medium time frame and is more easily achievable, then it probably makes sense. And I think Mr. Carney is going to defend it like he will across the board.
Okay, Cole?
Sure. I think this is, to Marci's point, part of an overarching objective for the Carney Liberals to make sure that they can differentiate themselves from the record of the Trudeau Liberals. In particular, we've seen Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. They oppose the EV mandate from the jump, so I think we're going to see another point for more cross-partisan, across-the-aisle cooperation here, which I think everyone agrees is a good thing. And, here, in watching the Carney Liberals separate themselves from the Trudeau Liberals, we have instances, in particular with the net zero by 2035 mandate, with the EV mandate, even with some of the Indigenous consultation on Bill C5. We've seen efforts where the Trudeau government and the Carney government have faced criticisms for getting too over their skis and having to backtrack a little bit. But on the political angle, the thing that I'll be looking at is how do people like Wilkinson and Guilbeault react to this and going in a different direction on the environmental front? We've seen some opposition from, BC Liberal MPs in terms of the Alberta-Ottawa MOU. How does this conversation envelop in caucus? Does the PMO care about Guilbeault and the more environmental section of caucus? Do they care about their opinions? And how will that relationship, take place and take shape going forward?
Okay, watching for that. George, what do you think? Will this silence critics to some extent?
No, I don't think so at all. I think, in fact, in some ways, it's almost worse. Like when you completely retract, it just feels like he's abandoning it, and you say, okay, what's coming next? But what we see with this is what's next, and and it's far, far short of what was there before. I think it's an attempt to do a lot of things all at once, and I think again, I've said it before, and lots of people say it, but Mark Carney, sure, the situation Mark Carney's in is very difficult. You're trying to deal with Trump and what's going on in the world and all this stuff that's going on, but he stood up and said he could handle it, and that's what people voted for. And I think he's still in some ways in a honeymoon phase. Like he's certainly still getting a lot of credit, and we see his own personal popularity pretty strong. But I think it's going to be hard for them to continue to square that circle going forward. And I think an announcement like this just says, okay, well, this is all you've got. Well, then people can step back now and evaluate now.
Yeah, but given, and you acknowledge it, the difficult moment that we're in, acknowledging the fact that Donald Trump successful attempt to reshore back in the U.S. car production has already had an impact on the industry. Isn't compromise necessary at this point?
Well, again, I think he's trying to do some of that, but I think it's kind of halfway on all of it, right? Like I think there's some interesting stuff around the credits not being capped for Canadian vehicles. Like that's an interesting angle. It means you can buy a more expensive car, but I don't know a lot of Canadians going out there saying, okay, great, now I can afford a more expensive car because I get another $1,000 off or whatever on my EV. I think that's the problem. There's a lot of talk in this. I'm just not sure how much of it actually affects people's pocketbooks in the way that it needs to, or even really saves the auto industry.
Okay, so listen, we're going to have to see how Canadians either reward or punish Prime Minister Carney for this new auto strategy. Although I will say, as you talk about popularity in the polls, I want to bring up right now Main Street Research, because they came out with a new poll today. Take a look at the numbers. According to them, if an election were held today, 51% of decided and leading voters would vote Liberal. 36% would vote Conservative, 5% for the Bloc, 4% for the NDP, 2% for the Greens. There has been speculation that the Liberals might go to the polls to try to get a majority. Will numbers like this, and it's part of a number of other polls that have been positive for the Liberals, will that encourage an election anytime soon?
I love seeing polls like that, obviously. I mean, anybody would love to see their party sitting above 50%. But I think we have to take all of that with a grain of salt. And what we see today, the auto strategy announcement, conversations around housing, what the government is actually trying to do now is move from a stage where they were really setting the table to a stage where they can start demonstrating results. And I think it would be a bit perilous, despite the fact that the polling numbers look good today. The only poll that matters, as we all know, is Election Day. They have to be able to demonstrate some results before they seek the next mandate, I think. So there may still be some appetite to go to the polls sooner than later. I'm not discounting that possibility. It is real. There is a possibility we could go back to an election this year. But I think before that happens, the government needs to demonstrate some there. So we are going to see continued announcements. They are moving at a very fast clip. They have made significant changes to the senior ranks of the public service. They are shifting around machinery in order to be able to implement the agenda. And as soon as there is a little more meat on the bone in terms of tangible results, then we could be into election territory.
Okay, Cole?
Yeah, once again, I agree with Marci here. I think that they need to demonstrate some real wins, put some wins on display on the foreign level and on the domestic level before they go back to an election. Because if Mark Carney and the Liberals were to go back to the electorate right now, what do they have to show for it? They need some solid wins that they can point to and say, look, let us finish the job. We need another mandate. We need a majority. But what could they base that off of right now? So I really do think that they need to have some more substantive policy wins in order to do that, regardless of some polling that is undeniably in their favor. So with that in mind too, we're just going to have to see how they can navigate this, because Carney hasn't had a big win with Trump yet, not anything that's notable. The Davos speech, of course, was great, but there also hasn't been any domestic wins. So if they really want to contend in the next election, they're going to have to put some numbers on the board first.
Okay, George?
Well, I mean, look, I think there are definitely people within the PMO and senior folks in the Liberal Party who are talking about having an early election. I think they would want it. I agree with everything Marci said and what Cole was saying too, except I think, sure, they should have those things, but they're also afraid of the losses they might have, right? Like there is no real negotiating with Trump, so I don't think we're going to come out with anything that feels good there. The economy is still struggling. I don't think a lot of the stuff, as I was saying, like the things they're doing aren't going to really stimulate the economy. There's also the impact of the cuts they're talking about in the public service. So, I don't know that people will be happy about having to wait longer for their EI or their other supports and things, or watching food safety get cut. Like once those things hit the ground, people will feel them. So they might want to get out before that stuff too. And I think you see the Liberals right now taking care of all the by-elections that they have coming up and getting those people nominated and set up. So I think they're definitely getting their footing ready if they do decide to go early in the spring. And again, make no mistake, it will be them. I don't know about the spring, but I think by the fall, I think they'll definitely be accidentally finding themselves into an election and trying to convince people that it wasn't their fault. Okay,
watching for that. Listen, very quick go around here, because as we talk about election, of course, we were attending the Conservative Convention, I covering it, you participating over last week, and in terms of Pierre Poilievre, he gets a really high number amongst the party base, over 87%, but there wasn't any real policy shift in terms of trying to attract new voters to the base. Instead, we have this tonal change from Pierre Poilievre, no more bumper sticker talk, at least not in his speech last Friday, focusing on saying they'd be working with the Liberals on certain issues. Is that enough to get more people to the Conservative Party between now and whenever another election happens?
If it's enough, it remains an open question, but they certainly have to try. I think what the convention indicated was Pierre and the team taking some lessons learned and trying to do things a little bit differently. So you saw that the slogans were gone. We had a more emotive, a more high EQ conversation from Poilievre, talking about his daughter and about addictions and the problems that Canadians face on the streets. There's obviously a lot of rampant crime. So Pierre's talking to these social issues, social cohesion issues in particular, but then again also talking about housing and immigration, and then putting a new tone on top of everything. In addition to that, coming to the House of Commons, having a list of 5 areas in which they're willing to work with the Liberals, meeting with the Prime Minister. You know, this is a new foot forward for the Conservative leader to hopefully work on that base that they work so hard to establish, that Conservative voter coalition, and add enough people to finally get to the finish line and form government.
Okay, will that add more people, do you think, Marci?
This is the best week Mr. Poilievre has had, as far as I'm concerned, as leader. He did, to Cole's point, he looked stronger. He had a much more conciliatory tone, which is what he's going to have to demonstrate. But look, it's not reflected yet in the polling, and until or unless Mr. Carney has some major misstep, or if the government fails to deliver on its ambitious agenda, I'm not sure that Mr. Poilievre is going to carry this party over the line in the way the base hopes he will.
Okay, George?
Well, going back to where we started this conversation, like Mr. Carney has brought the Liberal Party all the way to right next to where Pierre Poilievre stands anyway. I mean, it's about time that he acknowledged that he's no longer running against Justin Trudeau, and he's running against somebody who that he agrees with on policy on a lot of issues. And so he had to acknowledge that. I think we'll see what happens. I think, again, we talked about this last week, but his caucus members are going to be the issue. Like, they're in that same way, a lot of his caucus members are very comfortable with what Mark Carney's doing. And that's the real challenge for him. So it could be what Pierre Poilievre needs, but it might be also what loses him a bunch of caucus support, and that would be a bigger problem for him.
Okay. I appreciate the insight.